I would like to welcome you and that you have taken out time for this particular discussion. And I would like to start the meeting telling you the brief background of these sessions. Basically, I am conducting these sessions with the leadership, senior leaders and the senior professionals like you. I have recently started this series with Mr. Rajneesh Firmani, and now you are here. So I would like if you can just brief my viewers about you and about your journey.
Yeah, see, basically, I am a lawyer turned compliance professional, almost more than 25 years in the industry. I worked in multiple organizations in legal capacity as a legal attorney as well as a compliance attorney to them. Starting from Canara Bank for a brief time as a public sector bank. Then I moved to the Reserve Bank of India and I was with the regulators legal department almost 5 years or so. So that is where I actually learned a lot of things about the regulation and that regulatory approach, etc., etc. So then I switched over to the fence, and from the regulator came to as a regulated entities role. I was with the ICICI Bank, and that time I got the opportunity to handle their legal matters relating to their international banking operations and transaction banking, etc., etc. Then I moved to Standard Chartered Bank. I was there in India for almost 7 to 8 years, handling mainly the wholesale bank compliance related aspect. So that is the first time when I moved from ICICI Bank, I switched over to compliance. The reason for that is when I worked in the RBI, I had got interaction with, and I was handling at that time, currently it is called as Department of Regulations. Earlier it was DPOD. So I was advising from the legal perspective that particular department, who is the custodian of almost 80% of the commercial bank regulations. So that is my familiarity with that regulations was one of the reasons for me to move to the compliance world from ICICI Bank to when I joined the Standard Chartered. So I was here till 2012 end in India. Then I moved to the Standard Chartered Bank's Singapore office as their trade finance compliance head. So I was handling the entire group's trade finance compliance. So this is what the whole spectrum of my journey pre my joining of the Federal Bank. So I worked in a public sector bank to a certain time and in the regulated entity as well as private sector bank and a foreign bank. So almost all gamut of the banking industry I have seen and worked in different roles. Then when I have got this opportunity in Singapore, I have this international exposure as well. So that was what in nutshell, my journey till I joined Federal Bank. Thereafter, when I was thinking of coming back to India, because what I see is one fundamental reason everybody will be looking into, because normally people goes out of India would remain there. Of course, standard of living conditions are different. But what I felt is that from a compliance person, your actual home turf is basically where you are very familiar with the regulations. The way in which, whether you are in Singapore or any other place, and in a large multinational group, what you are basically doing is actually getting the information from different countries. Though you will have a panoramic view, a broader view, but you are not taking a core decisions with your competitive area. So because I need to, even when I am in Singapore, it was a very peculiar situation. I need to get the India officers' advice on the regulatory matters in compliance. So though I know I worked in RBI, I know the RBI regulations, I have to depend on. So that is what the peculiar situation in compliance role if you're working outside the country. So then naturally when you come back to the country, that is what your home turf, you know the rules, how the game is going and all. So that is the attractive part for me to come back. And then I joined Federal Bank. Of course, I am handling the whole compliance here. Earlier in different organizations, I looked at compliance and the legal in certain aspects. Now I got the full visibility. The FCC team, that is Financial Crime Compliance related team, Anti Money Laundering team, is also reporting to me. Compliance compliance review teams, also monitoring teams, also reporting to me. And predominantly, when I worked in all the organizations, I was handling the wholesale bank corporate compliance related thing. Federal Bank, another advantage I got is that the first time I'm exposed to retail type of a banking and the agri lending, the small sector, there's microfinance, and so it's a wide spectrum. So that way, it was a very good enrichment for me. I got the full visibility to that the entire spectrum of compliance happening in the banking industry. So this is my journey.
Quite a long journey and quite an extensive journey, I must say. But like you said, no, that when you come back to your own country, you know the rules and regulations. But I will just add on one or parameters towards it. When I was in some discussion in Singapore, coincidentally, and from one of my organization, I was representing one of my organization there. And there were lots of people from a different part of the country, and one of the person was there at a very senior level. I won't name the organization in person, but I'm just telling you, that person mentioned a statement which really pinched me, because he said, I'm very happy that I'm not working for the Asia, because handling compliance is a very, very difficult challenge, considering the bribery, corruption, etc. issues pertaining to that. So I stood up. Definitely, he was indicating something which is connecting with me as an individual from the India. So I said, I understand the countries where the compliance is completely like a process based. Things are well settled because you are representing a developed country. But real compliance and the importance of compliance comes from a place where the things are developing, where the things will grow on, but it will take some time. But there is actually a role where you can contribute towards a compliance official. Otherwise, when things are just systematic and you have to only push the button and press the button, then what is the fun of being a compliance person? So I think when I stopped, he suddenly realized that he touched the very sensitive area. And after this end of the conference, he messaged me that after what you were mentioning during that conversation, I completely aligned and agree with you. Yeah. Now I really missing the challenging and the risk. I said these are the challenges which makes you more mature compliance professional, which I personally feel, that for the time being I can say yes, I am, after working with multiple corporates for almost 23-24 years now. But as you were explaining that you were in a regulatory front, you are in the business front also now, and it is a journey of more than 20 years. And specifically, banking is a sector where the expectations are very much different from the public, very much different from the stakeholders, because lots of trust factor is there in the banking sector, and banking is an industry which is very, very regulated as compared to the other industry, if I have to say. I'm not saying others are not, but banking is something where too much of the expectation from the regulatory side, because if something happens, it impacts heavily to the multiple people, I will say millions of people. So how you see as a compliance person different challenges of the banking industry, and how do you see that you have overcome all these challenges in the last 20-24 years now?
Yeah, see, I can talk about some of the challenges, and specifically I being a compliance and a legal person, from that area I can just put it into three aspects where I have seen these challenges. Number one, when I started somewhere around in 1996-98 onwards, at that time we had only two regulators in the banking industry: Reserve Bank of India and Securities Market Regulator SEBI.
Right.
Beyond that, the regulators are not at all there. But what we have seen over a period of time, today then came IRDA, Telecom Regulatory Authority, Provident Fund Authority, plethora of authorities are coming, and I have a list of regulated authorities. Plus, when I say in a compliance word, I will take even the self-regulated organizations, industry bodies like IBA, BIDI, BIBDA and all, because I have a list of nearly 30 to 38 bodies which the regulations, standards, customs and practices needs to be followed by the industry. So from a compliance perspective, if you look at, this is the widest spectrum and the plethora of regulations coming up every day to that extent. So if you subscribe to either any channel like Alpha Plus or to that extent, you will see that the number of regulations coming each day by day. So from an organizational perspective, and see some of the regulators very remotely we may be connected. So when I joined in Federal Bank, one of the regulatory authorities I need to see is that some of their letters came is National Highway Authority. The first my reaction was, what is there I have to do, a bank to do with the National Highway Authority of India? So what I'm saying is that spectrum has grown up very fast, and look at the definition of the compliance is very typically that it covers everything under the sun. Say you have to follow all the applicable laws, regulations, then it will say the industry rules, standards, what is there, and then it will come to internal policies and process. What else is left is what the big question we need to answer. So if everything is there, how come a individual or a team can handle this plethora of regulations, regulators and all those things? The biggest challenge, it is ever growing also. There is no end to it and it will go on growing. So that challenge, we need to tackle it the way in which one is definitely many areas of specialization starts in that area. And because when the RBI regulations started on the compliance special functions, it was part of some of the departments sitting in either legal or a vigilance or an operations department or even risk function, a small unit. From there, it has grown as an independent department looking after the resilience of the banking function, and it has grown up like any other departments or more than that. So multifold is what you can see because of this regulation. So what we are looking is, one is specialization, and we need definitely the informations and systems coming up, updating us appropriately. So we can't everything managed in a human manner with our human reading or analyzing these things. We require that machine and support, and of course the software and other supports what we are getting is one of the resolutions for addressing this. But every time we need to be vigilant because the fundamental principles are one and the same. We follow the rules with letter and spirit. So that is the first part of the challenges which I have seen. And the regulatory approaches also is changing. When I was in RBI, actually we used to get the references I'm talking about in the era of 98 to 2003 period. So from a legal department, I will get from the regulatory department, these are some of the observations, some of the actions taken by the bank, and can we take some action? Any action taking RBI being a regulated entity and a statutory corporation should be very careful. It should be legally sustainable in that manner. And therefore, our role was to hair split the Banking Regulation Act and see that, yes, whether we can have clear evidence here, we can do anything, we can give any guidance. Very strictly we used to go. So I was always thinking that even if very apparent certain things RBI to take action, how much preparatory works we need to do in-house. But when I moved to the ICICI Bank at that time, then I'm seeing a different phase. What is the power of the regulator and the way in which the regulated entity needs to be responded, and etc. So from that period onwards, what we look at the regulatory approach is completely different. Now they don't have any tolerance limit to that extent, and there was a period of even 3 or 5 years back, we will say we have done some 5 lakh transactions, 10 lakh transactions. Out of that, some 5-10 transactions might have missed the target or whatever it is in the regulatory spirit. But earlier, even the regulators would tolerate it because there is a process gap can happen. That was one of the thinking process. But it has been completely changed in the recent past, and very clearly they say your process should be perfect, and manually you can't expect everything can be done. You require systems, and I want zero tolerance in all these issues. This is the regulatory approach we are seeing over a period of time. This is a real challenge because the possibility and potential of human error has to be completely negated by the system support and the skill set. So this is where the biggest challenge coming up again. That is where one of the good lessons I have learned when I was in India. Always as a legal and a compliance person, we believed that processes were there. We believe the processes may fail because it all depends on the individual. You should hold the principle. But when I moved to Singapore, it was an interesting because every time they asked whether your process was strong, I was initial stages irritated. Why you are bothered much about the process? But then I really realized it is a Chinese way of approach, or in that jurisdiction, the way in which if you have a right process, it will run like a machine. You don't require a person to either correct it or manipulate or work. It will work. So that is where even the regulatory approach we can see over a period of time to see strengthen your process in such a way it will control all the requirements appropriately, and then if at all any aberrations are, that will be able to point out. So that is where it is coming up the process, and coupled with the system developments what we are happening, we can have I don't say every time we can have a zero thing, but we can nil or negligible level of error rates we can build. That is what the approach, and that is the directions actually we are all moving. And the trust factor is one thing you always mention. And what is happening is that there is no point in blaming the regulator also. They are answerable to the public, they are answerable to the parliament to that extent questions are coming up. And every failure what has happened in the system has created a problem. Starting from whether it is Harshad Mehta's episode or it's Nirav Modi's episode and all those things, there were certain system gaps, and that has been utilized by either you can say the manipulators or the fraudsters to that extent. But that created a huge jerk in the system. Then the position of disbelief comes into forefront, and then starts a lot of regulatory actions, controls coming in, everything coming up. So this is where the challenges are coming. Anywhere else a failure happens, then that could have been an impact in the whole system to that extent. Right. This is the real challenge what we are facing, and to that extent, always we approach what we take is that let us don't look from what the regulator is telling or where the regulator is focusing, because there are lots of blind spots. Look at the regulations, and all the regulations are for the benefit of the institution only. Why we are regulated, there is a reason. So regulator is not our enemy. And in India or anywhere, what I have seen is that any institution which is transparent and which is honest and having the integrity, there could be failures happening either because of the economic reasons or process failure, but regulators were sympathetic when you were very open and transparent to them to discuss the problems and have a mindset to rectify. So the solution to or the approach to many of these problems are with the regulator, build the trust with the regulators. And that is what I said. Somebody was asking whether we need to be afraid of the regulator. I said we need not be afraid of the regulator, but we need to be afraid of us. That is the fundamental thing. So long as we are doing the things in the right manner and according to the regulations, then we need not worry about it. Of course, we are in the business of risk. We will do mistakes, but recognize that mistake, rectify it, transparently inform the regulator. So So for last 25 years with that approach, I could survive in the industry.
I completely, when you're saying all these things, I really connect with, because I work with the insurance sector in the period when the regulatory framework was like working very hard to ensure that IRD being the regulator should justify its stand. And believe me, I can really stand with them, because even for the regulatory framework, even for the regulators also, it may be a learning phase when they are implementing certain regulations. For example, AML is something which was for the banking industry, but for the insurance sector, it came into the picture in 2006. The 31st March 2006 were the first guidelines, and interestingly, they have given that 6 months time to the insurance sector to adjust, to understand, to implement, and see all these things. And believe me, I really joined the time when in the January 2007, I joined one of the big insurance organization, and the regulator has come to our office in the March 2007. And I was, as you said, don't afraid from the regulator, and that is what I thought of. Okay, let us be calm. They are also human beings. They are also like understand it's the initial phase of the implementation of the regulations and so on. And believe me, it was a very good experience for me when I worked with the IRD officer for almost good amount of time in that particular industry and particular organization. Yeah, they have also now become quite matured, I will say. But yeah, the insurance sector and the industry as a whole needs to work along with them and accept the mistake, as you are saying, because that is something give both sides a win-win situation of learning and growing positively. So I have seen that you are in the RBI side and then into the banking on the other side of the banks. So what keeps you motivating? Because as you said, there are lots of regulations, plethora of regulatory frameworks, etc. So what one thing keeps you motivating your journey in the banking sector for last so many years? Anything which...
Yes. Basically one thing, what exactly is the banking is what really attractive, and what is the role of the bank in the economic scenario. Very clearly, bankers are the risk takers, the financial risk takers. So that is what the key role we are playing. So if you look at the economy and dissect it in that sense, you will say the entire money supply, what is happening, and the economic activity is happening, manufacturing, service, and all those things. The fundamental risk, a promoter and believes his plan of actions and ability, then you actually accept that risk and provide the funding, and the institutions may go right or wrong, or it may be successful, then you are actually successful in that event effort, but then there could be failure also. Basically, the bankers are the financial risk takers. And yes, definitely it is the highest regulated. The reason for that is that bankers are the only entity who can borrow money, who can take deposits across. It's a free license given. Then naturally, any such right will have an obligation connected to it, responsibility connected to it. So the way in which I see what motivates me, yes, of course, regulations are there. You are playing a very key role into that extent. And any 7 persons can form a public limited company, 2% private limited company. But then the moment you form a company, your legal identity is different from the individual what has been constituted. So the entire Companies Act and the provisions, rules are all giving certain standards of rules, how that should be operated. That is for the benefit of the industry. The same way when it comes to the banking, you have a free license to take deposit and borrow money across the jurisdictions wherever you are and deploy it in the right events, whether it is an investment or a lending to that extent. So therefore, naturally, your regulation framework to that extent is to protect how you behave in that. So these are the two motivating factors, I would say, is that the necessity of the regulations and the larger obligations are related to the rights which has been given to the institution, and we are a key player in the financial risk taking of the society.
And I think if I crux your it is something you're making an impact on the society, and the sector is something which leaves its impact for a long run and to a large number of people as compared to any other sector, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, like I have worked with the multiple organizations and as a compliance head, as a compliance officer, and I have seen one problem common, where, like for example, in insurance sectors, multiple organizations, whether it is A, B, C, there are so many, list 20 plus organizations. Similarly, for the banking sector, also there are multiple banks now in the country. So, have you ever come across where the sales people will saying, why you people, why our company is putting so much pressure on the compliance aspect, whereas the other company is not doing so much of the compliance? Your compliance is making our life difficult. Because I heard these things by the sales senior officials, where they used to say, why only you people are too much into the compliance where the others are not doing. So have you ever come across a situation where the conflict of business versus the compliance has come, and how you have overcome that?
Yeah, definitely. Situations are there. Definitely, it all depends on the business level maturity. So what they talk to us, it will depends on if I go to a branch, the way in which if I give the freedom, what they will talk is depending upon their understanding, their maturity level. When I come to a department and department there, it is a different thing. When I go to my other senior management colleagues, it is a different level. So one is definitely these questions will across. We can't just, it's not a uniform pattern. I can't believe that the same ability and the understanding of my board of directors should be there with each and every staff in the organization. Definitely these questions are part and parcel of whether it is a compliance or a legal or a risk function to face it. But over a period of time, when we look at the approach has got drastically changed. So everybody, so business, if you're looking for a short-term gain, definitely compliance may be costly. But if you look at for a long-term gain, then definitely compliance is an advantage. Look at any incident. When we start from even Harshad Mehta's incident, what happened? It was nothing. It's the banker's receipt and the system inefficiency for 15 days is what they have actually tapped. If you look at, no regulations or rules were strictly prohibiting any of these things. But ultimately, the organizations made a lot of money, profit also during that short time, and the risks were not appropriately assessed because there are no systems or controls to actually get the money back. So that was the scenario coming. So it is definitely a decision taken at that time. It's profitable to the commercial activity, but at the same time, the risk has not been appropriately mapped or matched, and the decision is not taken, and all of them lost the money also. Then the same scenario when it started, the LIBOR scam happened in London. Exactly the same thing. And actually, look at the activity. It is a term as well as a cash delivery of forex. It was not a regulated activity. That was one of the statement in the FCA activity. FCA report, what they have stated, Financial Conduct Authority, after investigation, said that, look, this activity is an unregulated activity. Then how are we coming into the picture? But it is being done by a regulated entity. So we expect to be the regulated entities giving the same set of rules. People made money out of it. But then there is a huge cost to all the money laundering related aspects. Yes, you might have some profit. You will hit with the loss in the down. So the compliance is not a cost in the long term of the organization, because it is an organization which you are going with a trust. So then the reputation is important. The penal actions are very, very critical to that extent. So if you look at that, and even today, nobody says that compliance and the business is not kept as two horses driving the vehicle in two directions. It is a joint effort. Only if you are a compliant, you can have the growth. So your question is right. Definitely these challenges will be there. And when we say this is what others are doing, my simple solution to it is that the compliance, as far as my present bank, Federal Bank is concerned, it is a choice we have taken. It is not somebody told that. So when we drafted the policy that we will be compliant, we will have zero tolerance on compliance breaches, it is a choice we have made. Once you have made the choice, say that I will follow the traffic rules, why you are bothered about somebody jumping the signal? So if you made a choice, stick to the choice. So that is what the two fundamental principle always I will see is that the growth should be along with compliance. And one of the slogan, not the slogan, the motto of the bank is very clearly most admired bank status. The most admired bank will not come with the business growth alone. All your controls are ineffective, then only you will have that admired status. The admired status comes from the trusted customers, stakeholders. So these are all the principles if we adopt. Nobody asked us to put a motto or a principle like that. If you have made a choice, then naturally we need to build in accordance with that.
Actually, Sunilji, you have very well covered my next question also, like the role of the leaders in ensuring that, because either compliance will be a ticker box exercise or compliance will be taken seriously in its real senses and the spirit. As you said, the regulations is something which needs to be fulfilled to ensure it is happening for the long run, because for the short term you can gain, but for the long run success, it is something which is required. So you have answered my next question, that on the role of the leaders also. So I must say that the coverage, because I can feel that when a compliance officer and a leader like you speaks on behalf of an organization and takes the compliance seriously, the motto automatically grows into the deep of the organization. Because compliance, I must say, it doesn't only go up to the top management, it can happen only till if it reaches till the end of the last employee. Because even a single employee, and we have seen the scams etc. in this country, where although the top management definitely wherever the scam has happened, but it started somewhere from any of the managerial level where it is. So yes, I completely align with your views, and I would like to say thanks for giving such a nice message to the viewers, and your experience is definitely amazing. So before we close this call, would you like to give a last message to our viewers on the leadership role towards the corporate governance?
Yeah, definitely the leadership role is the most important. That is where if you see even all the compliance messages coming from the regulators also saying that saying in the compliance world is the echo from the top. The echo from the top should be reflected in the middle level as well as the bottom. So when we look at that way, it should be first coming from the bottom also. Definitely the leaders need to have to establish that model. That is where I would look at that the way we have adopted some conduct principles, 5 conduct principles to that extent. The integrity, the due care, skill, transparency, and all those things. One thing I would expect from the leaders, don't segregate your private private life and professional life from this integrity principles. That is what one of the very good example I have seen. One of these directors of the UK, he was actually traveling in the UK tube. The Blackstone director, when he was traveling the UK tube, sometimes what happens is card has not sufficient balance, and actually he jumped the queue to that extent and go out. Once he was caught, then he told that, yes, 2-3 earlier occasion also I did that. And this matter, when investigated by the FCA, they made a very classical statement. I like that statement, saying that he has been prohibited entering in the financial activity for his life. He has been banned by the FCA. The reason they said is that it may be a private travel, but even in the private travel, he has no problem in cheating the exchequer. So such a person should handle the financial matters. So the leadership role, when we talk about model, not only in your professional life, even in our personal life, we need to build that integrity. That is the one message I would always like to say about. And as far as the larger chunk of the people is concerned, very clearly it is training, coaching, and make the process simple to that extent which they can understand and do that. You referred about the tick box approach. I just will make some comment on that. Yes, we can't completely discard tick box approach, because certain things, whether you have it or not, we can have tick box. But when I joined even Federal Bank, we had a practice earlier what seeing this nearly the compliance certifications given by the branches by some 150 or 200 items they are to quarterly basis to give a confirmation. They used to tick. They say exactly the tick. So when I joined, actually the first thing I did is that I could make out that nobody is applying mind while ticking it. So we stopped that practice. Instead, what we said is that, look at, we will give 10 scenarios, take the samples and do a testing, and then tell us whether it is working or not. So the time has been reduced. They can do it more properly. And I made sure that when you're doing a self-testing, whatever is the defect you have identified, you report it. There is no consequence to it. And believe me, this has become a good success, and even the regulator also certain of officers commented as a good practice. Every quarter, taking together all of our branches and departments, we are testing nearly 4 lakh to 5 lakh transactions in self mode. So they are not, nobody is monitoring it. They are just picking up the samples and testing, and they are actually letting us know my samples 2 I failed, 3 I failed, without any inhibition and problem. So this is what I feel when the leadership team need to have an obligation to ensure that we have a proper process to that extent, make it simpler for the ground level staff to understand. Then only compliance will happen.
Thank you very much, Sunilji, for your time, and I must appreciate that you have taken this time to talk with us, and for your information and the way you have explained it has come out very nicely. Thank you very much. Hope to see you sometime in person also. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.